In 1984, the world was introduced to one of the most beloved and recognizable horror movie franchises, A Nightmare on Elm Street, where if you die in your dreams, you die for real. Your killer in this slasher franchise is Freddy Kruegger, a burned, striped sweater wearing, claw wielding, and snarky maniac who always has something to say. It's easy for people to fall in love with this franchise. So today on Grotesque Brain, we are going over 10 facts about Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. In the 1970s, there was a very strange case surrounding a group of Southeast Asian refugees. The refugees in question escaped their home country to live in the United States of America, where they wouldn't have to deal with the destruction of war. But things would only get worse for these refugees, as they would suffer from terrifying nightmares. These nightmares in question would be so awful that they would downright refuse to get any sleep. But of course, this can only go on for so long. Eventually, some of the men did go back to sleep, where they would somehow die in their slumber. There was no cause for their deaths, no heart conditions, no strokes, no disease, or any sort of infliction. They just died. Back at this point in time, the now past writer and director Wes Craven saw the newspaper clippings on the LA Times that described a strange event. This was said to be the main inspiration for the film A Nightmare on Elm Street. However, this was not the only inspiration for the film. Wes Craven would gain a lot of inspiration from his own life for his films. For example, when Craven was young, he saw a strange and creepy old man walking on the sidewalk outside of his house. This old man would stop in his tracks and turn over to stare at Wes, who was behind the window. After a while, the old man turned and walked away. He was of course startled by this event. In fact, it startled him so much that the event would become the main inspiration for Freddy Kruegger himself. Speaking of Freddy Kruegger, he went through a lot of changes during development of the film. First, he was supposed to have more of a disgusting looking face with an exposed skull and whatnot. However, the makeup artist at the time, David B. Mueller, said this was not possible. Another thing is that he was supposed to be a pedophile and child molester rather than a child killer. It was changed because Wes was afraid the viewers would think he was promoting child molestation, as this was a huge problem in California at the time where the film was being produced. What's interesting is that both of these qualities make a return in Michael Bay's 2010 adaptation of A Nightmare on Elm Street, despite the fact that the film is heavily panned for that exact change. But what if I were to tell you that Freddy was never real at all? That may sound silly, but you'll see what I mean. Originally, the film was supposed to have more of a symbolic ending rather than the traditional twist ending that most other horror films try to have. Instead of burning Freddy, Nancy was going to kill the dream killer by simply choosing not to believe in him anymore. He would disappear and Nancy would wake up, revealing that the entire film was nothing more than a nightmare. But Robert Shaye, the leader of New Line Cinema at the time, demanded a twist ending instead. So it's fairly safe to say that we could have had a completely different film if it wasn't for child molesters and big corporate companies. Now let's look at some memorable casting moments. Johnny Depp is a huge recognizable face in Hollywood. He's portrayed many famous characters such as Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean, Mad Hatter from 2010's Alice in Wonderland, and Edward Scissorhands. Funnily enough, he makes his acting debut on Nightmare on Elm Street as Glenn Lance. But this wouldn't be the last time Johnny would be a part of a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, as he would return in Freddy's Death, The Final Nightmare, as Oprah Noodle Mantra. As we know, the person who plays as Freddy Kruegger in the original Elm Street film was Robert Englund. However, this wasn't always the case, as originally, David Warner, who also played as Sark in the MCP from 1982's Tron, and Spicer Lovejoy from 1997's Titanic, was supposed to play as him. But due to a conflicting schedule, he had to leave the role. After new auditions were made, Robert Englund got the role due to his willingness to go into dark places. I hope you're all enjoying the video, because I'd rather not bore you all to sleep. The iconic glove that we all know Freddy Kruegger for. This was something that had nothing to do with a creepy experience with an old man, nor a newspaper clipping about people dying in their dreams for no reason. Wes Craven wanted the nightly killer to have a unique weapon that most horror killers didn't have at the time. This was to make him stand out from the crowd. The famous glove, the one that Robert Englund also accidentally cut himself with during production, got its inspiration from primal fears. More specifically, the fear of being torn to shreds by an animal's claws. During the creation of Freddy, Wes saw his pet cat unsheath its claws and began brainstorming. But there is one other notable fact about this iconic weapon. And that is how originally the glove was going to use fishing knives instead of what was already used steak knives. Despite how much I was bashing big companies and how they forcibly change ideas around to make a product more profitable rather than unique, there's one major good thing that came from New Line Cinema. For you see, after Wes Craven made the script and finished it in 1981, no matter who we presented the script to, it would always be rejected. For 3 years, the script floated around until New Line Cinema finally picked it up. Nightmare on Elm Street was originally going to take place in Los Angeles, California. In the official script, a teenage boy had this line, "California is the most high and palmy state, man." For a long time, the official setting was never revealed. That is until Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, where the name of the town was said to be Springwood. Later installments of the series would go even further, stating the location is Springwood, Ohio. Some of you may already know this, but Freddy Kruegger made one appearance in a fighting game. This game in question was Mortal Kombat 9. In this game, he was the only horror movie guest star, while the only other guest was the PS3 exclusive Kratos from God of War. The development team had many different ideas for horror movie slashers to appear in not just Mortal Kombat 9, but also older Mortal Kombat titles. Despite this, while Jason Voorhees, Leatherface, the Predator, and a Xenomorph all make playable appearances in Mortal Kombat 10, Freddy does not. Well, in the PC and console versions anyway. He was, however, recently added into the roster of the mobile version of Mortal Kombat 10. Why wasn't he added into more popular and preferred versions? Most likely because many of the people who worked on Mortal Kombat 10 are still hard at work on their next big fighter, DC Injustice 2. However, there are many rumors that Kombat Pack 3 will be released in the future. Whether or not this is true or if Freddy will be a part of the pack is completely unknown.